Hey everybody, it's Rory from A&S Gear, and today we're going to learn how to do some general maintenance on your paintball markers. Okay, so we've got some Azodin guns to look at today. I have the Blitz and the Blitz Evo. The reason I have both of them out here is because they are almost identical to each other. So rather than having to shoot a bunch of different videos for a bunch of different guns, we're going to shoot one video that'll cover two different guns. There are some differences between the two, but nothing that is mechanical enough to where it would cause a difference if you were looking for problems or if you were taking them apart. The Blitz has a standard, just kind of like rake style trigger. The Evo has a bearing, I don't know, scythe kind of trigger. It has an on-off ASA, and this one has just a standard screw-in ASA. They both have the same feed neck, same regs, same valve, same cup seal, same striker, same everything else. The boards, the Zen board or the Zen programming in the boards is slightly different between the two. I think the Evo has a full auto mode while the Blitz has a CFOA mode. So mechanically they're not really different. Cosmetically they are, and function-wise they're slightly different, but not anything crazy different to the two. So we're not going to actually pull the Blitz apart. You can follow along with the Evo and basically take apart your Blitz at the same time. So we're going to basically talk about troubleshooting issues with these two and break them down so you can see where they would have some problems. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly strip the gun down, take the frame off, take the reg off, take my parts out that I need to, and then we'll talk about it kind of more as we put it back together and where your problems might come from with a gun like this. It's very simple, very straightforward. So let me spend a couple minutes to take it apart, and then we'll go from there. Woo, come back. Now on this one, I am going to take it apart by removing the eyes from the side of the body rather than unplugging the eyes from the frame. If we're going to remove the frame from the body, there's really no reason to unplug the eyes from the board and then try to refunnel that wire, rethread it through the solenoid area and try to get it to line up properly again. We don't need to do that. All right, so let's see if I can unscrew this without having to. Kind of slow going right there. See if I can get that. Hey, sometimes the macro fittings can be hard to pop off on these. They like to stick, so you can sometimes just unscrew them while leaving it together. But should you need to, and you've never dealt with a macro fitting before, you can see that it has a little collar at the top right here, and then you've got your hose right there. These two pieces are going to just slide together. When you connect it, you just push, and they go together. What's happening inside of there is the hose actually slid through an O-ring, and the O-ring is sealing it, and this little top ring actually drops into the fitting right here and has teeth on it, and it holds the macro line in place. The top collar, what they call it, does not seal the fitting or seal the macro hose. It's the O-ring that's inside here that seals the hose. So when you want to remove this, you need to press the collar down. So you compress the collar against the fitting, and then you pull the hose out of it. So I usually try to grab it with my fingers right here, and I squeeze it down, and then I pull the hose out. If you ever have a leak coming from here, typically the hose is not the problem. If it's an old hose and it's got all sorts of cuts and cracks on it at the bottom, replace it. But if you pop the collar off, take a pair of needle nose pliers or rounded needle nose like these, and you get it underneath the collar, and you just kind of wiggle it and pop the collar out. And then underneath here, hiding down inside, is a size 10. This is a 1070 urethane O-ring, or I'm sorry, Buna O-ring, not urethane. 1070, or it's referred to as a 010-70 Buna O-ring. You can find them anywhere. They're very common. Well, I shouldn't say that. 90% of the macro fittings on the market for paintball have this O-ring in it. A lot of guns use this O-ring in them. Planet uses this in their guns. So this is a very, very common O-ring. If you look on the website, it's called a QD O-ring. You can order them from there. You can order a 01070 O-ring. You just put it back down in there once you've replaced the O-ring. If your hose is bad, replace the hose. Put the O-ring in, push the collar back in. Very easy to fix macro fittings. If you have a leak, that doesn't mean you need a new one. You just need a new O-ring. I don't know if I should tell people that. I should tell you, buy a new fitting. No, you don't need to. All right, so I am going to take this off. I don't even really need to take these off. I'm going to take one side off because I might need to put a battery in it when we go to reassemble it. I probably should put a battery in it. So we'll take one side of the grips off and we'll leave the other side attached because we don't need to take the other side off. Grips off. You can see our battery is going to fit right down in here. We've got our eye wires. We have our solenoid wire, and we have our micro switch wire and our power wire. All right there. All right, so let's take the frame off now. I'm going to take the frame off, or I'm going to take the screws out of the frame, I should say, but I'm not going to pull the frame off. I'm going to make sure that my eyes have been pulled off the body. So I'm going to pop them out and make sure that they are away from the body. If I just pulled the frame off before I did that, there's a good chance that the eyes would be stuck in here and I might rip the wiring out. I could break the eyes, clip the wiring, put too much stress on the connector down here. I could cause all sorts of problems. So I'm going to pop these eyes out, just kind of move them away from the body so that they're splayed out like that. And then I should be able to easily just pull the frame off. Remember, our magnet is up here. This is our trigger return magnet. Don't lose that. Sometimes they become unstuck and they'll be floating all around inside here. You just need to put it back there, and you can glue it back down if you need to. But don't lose it. Really helps with the trigger. Okay, we need to remove our vertical ASA so that we can get our valve assembly out. Underneath our ASA there is an O-ring, so don't lose it. Don't drop it. Hey, there it goes. Most of the time it will just stay sitting right there. But if it does fall out, you can always just put it back in. Will be important. You need to have that later on. Let's take that out. So we've got our front body plug, or you can call it whatever you want, our cup seal plug, this cup seal spring or valve spring, the cup seal and the post right there. We need to remove the valve screw or valve plug, valve retainer, and then we can go ahead and push the valve out the front. And you can use a pen, you can use whatever you want. Just don't use something sharp that is going to scratch or mar the surface or the valve in any way. And the valve must come out from this way out the front, not out the back. All right, so let's get that out. Woo! All right, so very important when you take a valve out that you know what direction it came out and you know which direction it came back in. If you install the valve backwards, like this or like this, depending on which kind of gun it is, it's very easy to make the gun not function at all. So as you're pushing the valve out, if it's the first time you do it, look at it and say, okay, the whatever O-ring came out first, or if you happen to be changing O-rings and replacing them, the side that I saw first was flat. The side that I saw first was not flat. Whatever it needs to be so that when you put it back together, you know how it assembles. In this particular gun, this is how it comes out. It comes out with the wide open hole first, because our cup seal, which is this black piece, or white piece right here, needs to seal against the valve. It's not even close. If you have it flipped around the other way, you can see that it doesn't actually make contact with the cup seal. and it will leak. So it needs to go that way, right there. All right, so together there. That's it. That's everything that's inside the gun. It's all empty. Through there you can see that there's no muss. Feed neck, this unscrews off the top. The collar comes out if you need to. You can actually remove this out of here. It is difficult. You need to put something inside of it and then put it into a vise to get it out. So you can replace it if you want a clamping style feed neck or something like that. I would just recommend taking it to someone who has the appropriate tools to get that out of there. All right, so that's that. Oh, let's talk about where you're going to find your problems for the most part. In this particular gun, you can find problems in 3 different sections. You can find problems with leaking down the breech or through the feed neck or out the back of the gun. So a leak coming out this way, a leak coming out this way, or a leak that sounds like it's coming out like this. And those are all caused by the same problem. You'll just hear it in various stages depending on how bad the leak is in different areas. But it actually is all leaking from the same spot. You can just hear it in different ways. So in our gun right here, our valve controls all the air that comes up to this point right here. Our cup seal seals the air that fills the chamber inside of here. This part sits like this inside of here. So the spring pressure of the cup seal against the valve traps the air that's coming from our regulator. Move that up there. From our regulator up into the gun and being held inside of here. So between this O-ring and this O-ring, our regulated pressure is being stored inside there. If for some reason the seal between the cup seal, which is this white piece again, against the valve, if that is bad, maybe there's dirt on this thing, maybe it's got a mark in it, maybe there's dirt on here, maybe there's some sort of mark on this, and when they come together, they don't make a good, clean surface to seal against each other, air can escape around this and then into the hole and then come out and leak all over the place. So that's the first leak issue that you'll hear through that area. What can also happen is this does seal right here. So it's got a good seal against the valve, but the O-ring that's here is no good. And instead of air going through the middle, air goes over the top and will leak as well. So if it comes over the top, it can still go in the same spot. It can come out through here, up through the bolt. It can go inside and leak out the back. So if the cup seal is failing, or the face of the valve is failing, or this O-ring is failing, you'll hear leaks all over the place. And that's very, very common in this particular gun to have that kind of leak. Your second leak, that is your second most common, would be not necessarily a leak, but it causes an effect in the gun, a sputtering effect, where the gun will not recock itself. You'll pull it once and the gun will go and it won't shoot. So that is caused by this O-ring right here on the striker. So our striker and our bolt hook up like this together with each other. And then the spring goes in here like this. There we go. Like that. And then this goes inside here and that goes in like that. Right? So every time you shoot the gun, the hammer comes forward. I'll do it like this. Comes forward, hits the valve opens up, air flows up through the valve into the bolt, shoots out there, and then some of the air comes through the through the valve, and it comes out down here and it hits the front of the hammer, and this O-ring is sealing this area, and so that air pushes against the hammer, pushes it back where it catches on the sear again, and it recocks itself. So if the gun goes do, it's because this O-ring is not sealing the pressure coming through here and recycling itself. Now there's another possible explanation as to why that would happen as well. Because this gun has an adjustable regulator in it, and you're able to control the pressure coming in and out by the regulator. Well, you can't control the pressure coming in, but the pressure coming out. If you have your output pressure of your regulator set too low, When the pressure comes through the valve and tries to strike the hammer and push it back, it's just too low and it doesn't have enough force to do it. So that is definitely a possibility. So you do want to look at, make sure that your regulator is set properly. And you can see the adjustment on the bottom. There's a plus and a minus sign. So you turn that insert, that core inside of there, in the appropriate direction to increase or decrease velocity. I'll pull this reg apart in a second. You can see kind of the functioning of it right there. But if your gun sputters and doesn't recock, check that O-ring. If it sputters and recocks and you know the O-ring is good, check that it is lubricated, it's not dry, and also make sure that there is not paint, dirt, sand, crap around the bolt, causing it to travel slowly through the body, or the same thing for the striker. Where these two run through the gun needs to be clean and dirt-free. If it's dragging as it's moving, the gun will not work properly. So those two leaks, or those two problems, are 95% of the issues that you'll see with this style gun. The other one might come from the regulator malfunctioning or not working properly. So we'll open it up real quick and you can see where that problem would stem from. And typically it's from a bad reg seat. So you back that side set screw up a little bit. You don't need to take it all the way out, just enough that you can unscrew the gun or the regulator. So that comes apart. Inside here is our piston and our spring. Let's see if I can get that out. Okay, so that sits inside there. This cap comes off here. And then inside here, do I have the right tool? I think I do. There's a snap ring in there. Now this snap ring is not necessary. It doesn't need to be there. It just keeps this from being able to be backed out too far. There's our adjuster right there, with a nice metal shaving inside there. That would definitely have caused a problem in this gun. All right, so this sits inside here like this, and this is inside here. So this is able to be moved up and down. And depending on how far up or down you have, it's going to seal against the piston. You can see that there's a little red rubber seat inside of there, which makes contact with that, and it creates a complete seal. Depending on where this sits inside of the gun or inside the regulator, if it's sitting lower down here, okay, the piston that is up in this section of the body can travel further down to meet it. And what happens is you create a larger area, or a larger volume of air above the piston, and your pressure will go up. If you bring the piston or the adjuster up, the regulator piston can't travel as far. You decrease the volume above the regulator, which is where you're storing your usable air, and the pressure will drop. That is why if you ever adjust your regulator under pressure, so the gun has pressure in it, and you lower pressure, you have to shoot the gun a couple times in order for the pressure to equalize out, because you've created a smaller space, but you're still holding the same pressure in it. So you have to shoot a couple times, and then the pressure will equalize. If you increase pressure, if you drop this down, the piston can drop. You just create a larger volume, and that fills up with the new pressure. So probably not have anything to do with this gun, but might be interesting to some. So if you have a leak coming from the bottom of your regulator, you can check that O-ring right there. If the regulator is not charging properly, supercharging, over-pressurizing, it's typically the seat. So that part right there. You want to replace this piston and get a new reg seat for this to seal against. If you get a leak coming from the top, or actually from this little pinhole on the side of the regulator right here, most of the time the top piston O-ring is bad. The pressure that builds above the piston, which is normally held back by this O-ring, gets around the O-ring, and then it bleeds out of this hole right here, because this is sitting like that inside there. So if air is leaking from there, it can only come from up here. That's that. Regulators are actually quite simple in design. They seem more complicated than they are. All right, so let's put this back together and we'll go ahead and start reassembling and finish this up. With this particular gun, if you take your regulator and you screw it all the way together, so right now the pieces touching right there, they're against each other, and we go to tighten the set screw down, your regulator will not swivel anymore. You actually need to not tighten it down. Once you have come to a complete stop, you're going to go about a quarter turn back, use the right Allen key, and then tighten it down. And then you can try to swivel it. You want to make sure that this can swivel like that. If it cannot, you need to back the screw up a little bit, turn it just a slight little hair more, and then tighten it down again. If you go too far, you'll cause a leak. But if you close it all the way down, you won't swivel anymore. And that can cause a problem when you're trying to reassemble the gun. Okay, let's put it back together. Brain stopped working for a second there. Remember our valve direction. Valve direction needs to go first. And what I didn't mention, the valve on this gun has one knot hole. So this is like a guide pocket and then a hole on the other side. The pocket needs to face down. So it needs to face the bottom of the gun so that we can take the screw and put it in the pocket. And that will keep the valve from being able to slide back and forth inside the body and also rotate when it's inside the body. When we put this in, we don't want to just cram it through there. Be gentle. Push it down, and then we're looking for, you can actually see it sliding through right there. We want to make sure that the hole lines up. So right like that. And then we can put this in. And when we tighten it down, we go until we feel the screw hit the valve, and then we stop. We don't over tighten it. We don't need to snug it down. We just go till it stops. We don't want to shift the position of the valve. We can actually cause a leak by over tightening the valve or the plug into the valve. It'll crush the valve up against the body, creating a channel for air to escape around there. So just into where you feel it. Done, done, done. All right, we're going to put this in through there. We do have to line up this screw hole with the threaded screw that is going to come through and keep everything together. So we're going to go, might be able to see it. Yeah, right like that. Hold that in place. We're going to take our ASA. Now this can get tricky. We don't want the screw to fall out of here. We don't want to lose that screw, but we don't want our O-ring to fall out either. So it kind of becomes a balancing act of how many hands do you actually need. So I'm going to hold that screw in place with my finger. I'm going to hold the ASA, and then I'm going to put them together without the O-ring coming out of position. And I'm going to hold that. I'm going to tighten that together. Make sure that the O-ring didn't come out of its pocket. And then tighten it down. I also want to make sure that I've lined it up, that I don't have my ASA sitting sideways like that. So line it up on there so that it is vertically in position. And tighten it down. All right, so that's together. Now I'm going to put the frame on and then show you what to do to reassemble the gun with the frame on. We could put this together right now, and it would actually be easier than the way I'm going to do it in a minute. But most people take these pieces out with the frame still on the gun. And so putting them back together, it's important that you know how to do that. When we go to do this, we want to make sure that our eye wires are not going to get crushed by anything. So there's a channel that the eyes are going to fit in. You can see it running off this side right here and running off this side. We want to make sure that these wires get into that channel and are not crushed. If I did it just like this, I can't see it from that shot right there, you could see that the wiring is not in the channel right there. We don't want that. So we're going to move these back so that it goes through that one. Like that. And then I'm going to flip it over gently and make sure that the eye is in the same spot over here. Or in the same groove, I should say. Looks good. Then I can take my frame screws and put them back in. Tighten them down and make them snug. Don't over tighten them. And then we can reconnect our eyes to the body here. Now the way this was set up, you can see how long this wire is, and it's able to feed up through here. If I tried to put this in, my eye wire itself is longer right now than the port that the eye is going to fit in. So I need to pull some of that slack out. I'm going to pull the wire down so that that fits properly in place down there. I'm not going to pull too hard on it. I don't want to break anything. Just want to get the slack out of it. Take our detent, make sure that we put that in place. Help if we use the right side eye cover. And then put that in there. And help if we use the right Allen key. Little flip-a-doo. Eyes in the pocket, eyes in the groove, detent, and eye cover. If your gun is breaking a lot of paint, chopping a lot of balls, and you are not playing in like the frozen tundra where it's 2 degrees, check that your detents are good. If the nubs on the detents break and the gun is able to double feed, you will run into some problems. Or if they are dirty, if the eye sensors themselves are dirty and they're not reading paintballs properly, the gun will continuously just shoot, even though they're not supposed to. The way that break beam eye works is you've got a sender and a receiver as far as a signal, and when a ball drops in and it breaks that connection between the two pieces, it thinks there's a ball in there, so it will shoot. So if you break a ball in the gun and you've got paint that is covering either the emitter or the receiver, it thinks that that paint is a ball, and so it will just shoot whenever you pull the trigger. So once you've broken that first ball and you've made the eyes, you've tricked them into thinking there's always a ball in the breech. If a ball's halfway down, it'll shoot. If it's 3/4, if it's dirt, if it's a pebble or a rock, it will shoot no matter what, and you will just cause problems all day long. So when you break paint and the guns doesn't seem to be working properly, take the time to take your eyes off, clean them. It takes no time at all to pop this cover off, pop the eye out. You use a Q-tip or a towel to clean it and put it back together. It will literally save you so much pain and anguish. Just make your gun work. Screw our regulator back together. Perfect. Then we're going to turn our swivel up. See how easy that was? If we didn't have a swivel right there, we would have to open this up again and then reset the whole reg. We can swivel that back out, connect our hose, and then we're going to use a battery so that we can turn the gun on. Because in this situation where we have the frame on the gun and we need to get the hammer back into the gun, we do we do need to be able to cycle the gun. So I've disabled the eye system so the gun will shoot no matter what right now. And we'll go ahead and assemble everything. The reason we need to cycle this is the hammer sear is sticking up inside of here. So when we go to put the hammer in, it won't go in because the sear is in the tube right there. The sear would normally catch on this flat spot right there, this little edge, and it would keep it cocked back. You pull the trigger, the sear moves, hammer comes forward, Bob's your uncle, gun shoots. So what we need to do to get the sear to go in, or the hammer to go past the sear, is we need to put some pressure on it with our finger from behind, and then we need to pull the trigger. If we push too hard, nothing's going to happen. It won't even let the solenoid fire. I'm really pushing as hard as I can on it. I just need to put even, easy pressure on it, pull the trigger, and slide it across the top. We do not want to go any further at this point, though. We want to leave the striker in there so that we can see right there is the hole that the pin needs to connect to in there. So before we put the spring in, before we put the velocity adjuster in, we want to connect our bolt to our striker. And the reason we want to do that is if we put the spring in right now and we slid the hammer all the way forward, we put this in and we started to tighten this down and seal it up, the hammer's going to rotate because the spring's pushing against it. And no longer will we be able to connect the bolt properly because the hole will have rotated potentially out of the way. So to avoid that problem, we connect the bolt first, like that. Now we can take this and push on the bolt assembly because it's hooked into the hammer, slide it the rest of the way forward, and then we can connect our spring and our spring guide without having to worry about the hammer spinning inside there, and then we can't line it up properly. All right, let's go ahead and cock it back, make sure that it works properly. We'll turn our eyes back on, make sure that our eyes are working. They are. If I take a swab like this, I stick it in there, the eyes should think that the swab is a ball, so if I pull the trigger, it should shoot, which it does. So we know our eyes are functioning. We know that the board is properly set up. Turn the eyes off, the gun shoots. Everything seems to be working. At that point, we would want to gas it up, make sure that there is no leaking issues, that we solved the problem that we were initially going for, and we were ready to go out and play. So let's get the frame screws back on, or the grip screws. And we will call it a day. Electronic Azodin guns. Probably more simple than you thought. Well guys, I hope this helps you out with any questions or concerns you have about your paintball gear or products. And as always, for all your paintball needs, shop ansgear.com.